If we look into the traditional success culture, you realize that this whole thing is a narrative bullying towards people that are neurodivergent. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Jingwen and I have ADHD. So the reason why I'm very interested in this topic is because recently I started reading Principles. It's one of those books that people call a must-read for success, filled with structure, rules for decision-making, work, and life. But as I was reading, I start to feel uncomfortable. Narrative bullying happens when a dominant success story presents itself as the only valid way to achieve success, implying if you don't fit into the framework, the problem is you. It's not an outright bullying in traditional sense, like someone deliberately attack you or insults you. Instead, it's subtle. It's when the story that we consume, advice we hear, or the model they give us make us feel inadequate, simply because we don't operate the way they expect us to. For neurodivergent individuals, these type of narratives can feel extremely isolated. It creates a world where we feel like we're constantly failing, not because we lack of ambitions or effort. If you ever read self-improvement books or motivational videos, you've probably seen some variation of these. Wake up early, hustle hard, be disciplined, push through failure, never give up. On the surface, those sounds like solid advice, but here's the issue. These rules assume that everyone has the same cognitive and emotional toolkit to implement them. They are built around neurotypical way of thinking, working, succeeding. This narrative implies that if you're struggling, it's simply because you're not trying hard enough. They rarely acknowledge that different brain operating differently. For neurodivergent people, the traditional sense of success culture is not only not helpful to a point that it's gaslighting. It sets up a standard that is never meant for us. Then it makes us feel like failure when we can't meet it. Let's break it down. For someone who has ADHD, if you're telling them just be disciplined, it's like telling a blind person to just read a sign. Executive dysfunction makes it extremely difficult for people who have ADHD to initiating tasks, including things like washing dishes, getting up from your bed. Traditional success framework doesn't acknowledge for people with ADHD, discipline itself is just not enough. Because we also need structures, dopamine-driven systems, accountabilities, external motivations to make us function at our best. Another example would be for autistic person, telling them networking is the only way for you to climb the career ladder is like telling them the only way to win this game is to master the rules that makes no sense to you. At this point of the video, I wanted to summarize some of the key points this book talks about and why it doesn't work for people that are neurodivergent. The author outlined some of the characteristics of an ideal employee in a high-performing workplace. Radical truth and transparency. Employee must be open to constructive criticism at all times and be willing to engage in intense debate about their work performance. High-intensity collaboration, resilience, and persistence. These traits are framed as the universal marks of excellency. This is where I felt extremely uncomfortable. Many of those expectations directly conflict with neurodivergent individuals' ways of processing stress, processing motivations, and processing feedback. Using a common experience in ADHD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD, where criticism, no matter how constructive it is, can trigger intense emotional distress. The radical transparency model for openly discussing performance flaws in front of peers may work for neurotypical employees, but can be crippling for people with ADHD, leading to self-doubt, anxieties, and avoidant behaviors. One of the biggest takeaway of Principle is the idea of rationalizing suffering. It's saying that struggles are meaningful and leads to growth. On the surface, it seems right. The mindset of worshiping suffering or hardship is like an ultimate test of someone's character by seeing if they can push through all sorts of difficulties. Of course, resilience is a great characteristic, undoubtedly valuable. But this philosophy ignores that in reality, some of the suffering is just not productive. It's even harmful, especially for neurodivergent community. If someone with ADHD put into a structure that has no accommodations for their conditions, what will happen is their brain will constantly fight against the structures, leading to a cycle of shame, burnout, avoidance, and failure. And the solution here is not to toughen up. Not all suffering are productive. Some struggles like executive dysfunction, sensory overwhelmed, or rejection sensitivities are not learning opportunities. They are barriers that requires accommodation, not endurance. The problem isn't that the book is wrong. For neurodivergent individuals, the real challenge is not to overcome their brain. When success narratives fail to acknowledge neurodiversity, they don't just exclude people that are neurodivergent, they make them feel like they're constantly broken. Instead of recognizing traditional methods aren't universally applied, we tend to internalize that struggle and blame ourselves, thinking that we are the problem. We force ourselves into routines that doesn't fit us, and we burn out trying to follow a system that were designed without us in mind. And that's why understanding narrative bullying is so important, because only with that concept in mind we can start asking the right question. Who is this advice really for? Does this framework actually work for me? If those rules weren't written with neurodivergent people in mind, how can we adapt them? Or better, how can we create our own rules? And this is something that I want to tell you who are still watching this video to this point. You don't need to constantly prove your value. And most importantly, understand that success comes in all forms. That the success for a neurodivergent people might look differently from a traditional career path, and that is okay. And that's it for today's video. I'll see you in the next one.